some emails that have come in already. Emmett have sent me challenges with children's eating. Parents are telling me that children have been sick, they've dropped foods, they've never returned them. They no longer eat foods they did eat when they were younger. They have very limited meals, especially dinners. They don't eat veg unless camouflaged, or some children, lots of children I see would eat no veg. Some children I see don't eat any protein or very little, or they won't eat fruit. Or that professionals dismiss this limited diet. So a classic example, without highlighting any certain profession, is, parents would talk to professionals about their concerns about their child's limited diet. And often the response they get is the child is growing and aren't they fine? And they have energy, or, look at them, they seem fine. But yet their diet is very limited. And generally no one would dispute, if you looked at what they're eating, like just carbs or no fruit, no veg, no protein, whatever the case is, or very little of those food groups, it is very unbalanced. No one is arguing that that is an ideal diet or even a great diet, but people will kind of dismiss it and say, oh, sure, don't worry, it'll get better by itself, it's just a phase. But sometimes for, I suppose, a significant number of children I help, that isn't the case. And as I said already, diets can get worse over time. So that's just me from Go and Healthy Eaters. So Emmett, have we some questions?
We do. Thanks for that, Collette. Well done. And I expect a lot of parents wonder about. So a very active child. Can you offer advice on nutrition for primary school children involved in sports like swimming, for example? So kids who are very, very active, nutrition for those kids. Anything in that line? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
So again, they may need more frequent snacking because they have such an active life. The other thing, I suppose, is to focus not just on quantity, but on quality. So, the balanced plate, for example, are they getting some protein at every meal? Are they getting more substantial fuel than just carbohydrate, like the bowl of pasta? So you'd focus on quality of food, kind of more nutrient dense food, rather than just, as I said, a bowl of pasta.
Okay, there's a similar question in a way, right? But my 13-year-old son, right, growing very fast, and constantly hungry, even after a nutritious meal, the result of frequently snacks, biscuits. Otherwise, he would have apart from that, has a healthy diet. To suggest any kind of nutritious filling snacks, so I try and get him off the biscuits, I suppose. Any other thoughts on that?
And the other thing maybe is he eating enough at the mealtime? I see my kids, they have big appetites for the size of them. So, some of those kids can actually eat, a very big portion. So you might, I'm just saying, this might be one scenario that, a certain amount of dinner is offered. So I would say to them before they leave the table, are you sure you have enough to eat now? Are you full? Are you satisfied? Or whatever way you want to phrase it, so that they aren't thinking, okay, I eat a bit of dinner and then, I can eat loads of snacks. And possibly most kids like biscuits, but it could be because they're hungry, so they need to eat maybe a bigger quantity, as well as looking at, the quality of the food they're offered. Are they getting the protein, for example? Is it more of a balanced meal? So if you're looking at snacks, more nutritious, very energy dense snacks would have some protein in them, so like your nuts and seeds, things like energy balls, your hummus, there's lots of different, I suppose, nutritious snacks out there, depending on what the particular child likes. So the quantity might be needed looking at, as well as the kind of quality of what's been offered.
Okay, what about this one? My son won't eat dairy at all. Is there something as a substitute for that? No dairy. What else can you put into the diet?
Okay, so I suppose in some cultures, kids, once they're weaned, don't have any dairy. In Ireland, we seem to, and in some cultures, get a little bit freaked out if children can't eat dairy or won't eat dairy. So it isn't essential. Obviously, there is calcium in dairy, and that's good for our growing bones and teeth. But there are lots of other foods that contain both calcium and also other nutrients that are needed for teeth and bones, for example, magnesium. So what I would say is, a variety of other foods. There's, like ground almonds. There's lots of other non-dairy sources of foods. So generally, if our kids, for example, are eating some nuts and seeds every day, they probably are getting the calcium they need, and they may not need any, or they may not have any dairy, and that's fine. So there's lots of other ways of getting non-dairy foods into kids, and that doesn't mean they're not getting all the requirements they need.
Okay, and tell me this, I should be fully covered now, but my child is overweight and has a big appetite. I think it's a younger child. My child is overweight and has a big appetite. How can I help her?
Okay, so again, you need to look at things like, what is been served. Is there a balance? I seem to have the same answer for all these questions, but it is really important, to have a balanced plate. Again, not just the bowl of pasta. So again, I think tuning into, what our children are feeling. So sometimes we eat because, it's a habit. Or we're bored or we're sad or whatever. There's always lots of reasons to eat other than hunger. So it is a good idea, even for very young kids, to start this idea of, listening to your tummy. What does it say? And if our children, for example, overeat, let's say they go to a party and they get sick, well then, making that connection, well maybe, if we ate a little bit less, we wouldn't feel as bad. So it's really important, and you can do it from a very young age, even preschool, starting kids to think about, what is my body telling me? Because your body will, tell you if you want to listen, but often we ignore it, So we eat, as I said, lots of times when we're not hungry. So there's, as I said, lots of reasons kids may be eating, but then are they actually always physically hungry? Sometimes we can be a little dehydrated, and we might think we're hungry. So again, offering a drink first. So, more than just a balanced plate, I think tuning into what our body is saying and what our children's body is saying is really important. So let's say it's dinner time. I think, okay, our kids should eat. But if they're not hungry, let's say they had a substantial snack earlier, we shouldn't, make our kids eat. So there's a lot of kind of expectations around eating, and I should eat, and other people are eating, or the food is available, and it may not be necessarily driven by hunger. And really, eating should only be driven by hunger. So it depends what's going on, but that's just some ideas.
Thanks for that, Collette. It seems to me now that everywhere I look in supermarket, there's protein, everything's protein. But there's a question here come in. Would you recommend high protein milks to increase protein intake?
So what I kind of say, and this is, I suppose you'd see it more in secondary schools, is there is a lot of a kind of focus on a high protein diet. So generally, most of us aren't low in protein. Obviously, the kids who don't eat any protein is a different story. We're getting protein from a variety of sources, and really what we should be prioritizing, I think, generally is kind of real food. So protein is naturally in our meat or whatever, rather than having to go to other sources of kind of, added in protein. And there's already a bit of protein in milk now. That's not very substantial, but it's sometimes, like the protein powders and stuff, they're not the best quality protein. Yes, it's protein, but as I said, if you have a balanced diet and you're getting protein, we'll say the 3 main meals, you shouldn't really be looking for other sources of protein. And some people can eat too much protein, and it puts stress, it's too much for their body, and it's stressing out their body. So there is a lot of focus on protein, sometimes in terms of weight loss, because, protein is more satisfying. And if we eat, protein with our meal, we won't be as hungry again. But I think it can go a bit extreme, and there's like protein, and, that's too much. So the focus on kind of the everyday, regular foods, real foods, rather than kind of looking for these particular products that are high in protein, and the protein added sometimes isn't always the best quality in terms of things like, it's a type of isolated pea protein or something. I mean, you don't get that naturally. Some factory makes that. So we want to be really prioritizing real food most of the time if we can, because that is the most easily absorbed. We know, our body can use it. But if you're, taking these other kind of things, you're like, is that really, am I absorbing that? Or, it gets trickier.
Collette, there was a little like this, right? Around smells. I don't know what I would call it, phobia, but it'd just be like a child who doesn't enjoy eating at school. She likes the food, right? She likes to pack her lunchbox, but dislikes the smells of other food, children's food, doesn't enjoy eating her lunch. I think there's another one from another parent saying the child would be saying similar things at the dinner table, that the smells are putting them off, that kind of thing. So, And
So some children are very sensitive to smells. Others, are very sensitive to textures. In particular, a lot of kids would, want crunchy textures. For example, they don't want mixed textures. Like fruit, we say in yogurt. Pieces. So some smells are obviously stronger than others, and they may, be sensitive to some particular types of smells, even cooked fish or whatever. So I suppose what generally I recommend in any of those cases is that we start with where the child is currently, and we challenge them a little bit outside their comfort zone. So, we would expose them to mild smells, and build on that. And it's about being very positive, no pressure, and doing it in a very gradual way. So sometimes, like the textures, our children need to get, used of something different than what they usually have. And they need to be challenged a little bit, because otherwise they'll always, I only eat smooth purees, or I only, don't eat fish or whatever. So that's kind of a process in itself, but it needs to be positive. It needs to be step by step, meeting them where they're at and just slowly moving them to the next step. And there might be 10 steps before, they get to, a significant difference. You can't rush those things, you can't kind of assume, oh, that's silly, it's just whatever smell. If our children are very sensitive to it, well, then that's the way they are. And we have to, help them and support them with that, rather than kind of dismiss it or, kind of pressurize them to, just accept as something they find very difficult to accept.
Okay, the strange one here, but I think we should ask it, right, is I have a problem with a 10-year-old daughter. She's afraid to eat after choking incident. Very worried about her. She's already very thin, can't afford to lose weight. Any advice? Much appreciated.
Okay.
Ever come across anything like that?
Yeah. So sometimes particular things happen. So like choking, or, kids eating and they got sick or whatever, and they have obviously memory of that, and they have associations with that. So let's say she was eating chicken and there was a choking incident. Then, after that, all meat or whatever would be off the menu, let's say. So, we need to kind of, I suppose, I would have a cognitive behavioral approach. So, we need to look at the thinking behind that, and, why did that happen? Was it a once off and we didn't do this maybe, or this happened and we won't have that happen again, as well as the kind of behavioral approach, so that that association gets changed, and she's supported in a way that she sees, okay, there isn't a likelihood of choking, isn't as strong as I thought before. This is a safe food. It's, nothing bad will happen to me, or, this isn't the likely outcome again. So I would encourage that parent to get in contact with me at Grown Healthy Eaters, and let's get to the root cause of it and support her, because, that's difficult, isn't it? And it's putting her off probably other foods. And she's afraid. Is she afraid of eating, or afraid of eating certain foods? So that's limiting her. And it's very negative, that memory and that association.
Collette, thank you.
Thank you, Emmett. It's been a pleasure, and thanks everyone for listening. It was great to get to talk to so many of you, and I hope you found it useful.